Howdy folks, Greyhawk 4x4 coming at you again. Your resident vintage gamer. And today's video is going to be a little bit of a hard pill for me to swallow because I'm pretty pissed about the whole ACTIVISION firing about 800 people after announcing their record earnings and profit. You know, 2018 was their best year ever, blah blah blah, but we're restructuring, so that means we're firing a bunch of people. And when I say it's going to be a hard pill for me to swallow, it's that it's going to be difficult for me to get through this video without losing my shit. Okay? So I'm going to try and maintain. I'm going to try not to get too worked up. It's not good for my blood pressure. But I have a unique take on this, as I try to always have. I try to be able to add something to the plethora of YouTubers that have already done videos today about this very subject. So you may have already watched 2 or 3 or 5 of those, other videos. Boogie2988, heel versus babyface, the quartering. I could go on, etc. So they've covered the numbers. I'm not going to bore you with numbers. I'm not going to go into figures and say, that they did this many millions or billions or, any of that. I'm not going to go into any of that stuff. What I'm going to talk to you guys about is what I feel is the root of this whole conundrum that we find ourselves in. And that is the corporate America business model is what I call it. And it isn't that old. The model that I'm talking about isn't that old in the grander scheme of things. In the last, let's say 20 years is when it really started to kick in, about 20 years ago. And I know this from personal experience. So we're going to go into a little bit of a story time here, because most of you probably have no idea that in my previous lifetime, I like to say my previous lifetime, but in another part of my life, that I've been here in Utah for 13 years, or probably longer than that now, if I did the math. But I was in the Army for 5 years, almost 6. And when I got out of the Army, I went into private security. There's only 2 things that you can do when you get out of the Army, depending if you were in a combat specialty. Now, if you were a medic or an MP or a radiologist or a radio operator or something like that that could transfer to civilian life, and you could, MPs can become police officers in the civilian world. Medics can become nurses, or go down the medical path and try to become a doctor, whatever. They could be paramedics, whatever. Radio operators can go to work for telecommunications companies, etc. That type of thing. But if you are in a combat job, you generally have 2 things you can do when you become a civilian. You can be a truck driver, or you can do security. And I chose the security path. I went to work for Universal Studios Hollywood. And I started at the very entry level. $6.36 an hour, security officer, entry level, what they called a production officer. And I ended up working my way up, all the way up. I don't know how many promotions it would have been, but I ended up becoming the project manager for security at Universal Studios for the contracted guard service that was there. And then I eventually got offered a position in-house from Universal to become the security operations manager for the studio. And I took it. Good job. But during my tenure there, I saw a couple of different contrasts. When I first started at Universal Studios, and this would have been 1990, the studio was still owned by a gentleman known as, his name was Lou Wasserman. And Lou Wasserman had bought the studio in 1966. And he'd had it all those years. And even though it was a big company, he ran it like a big family. I mean, it's cliche to say, but he did. And the examples I will give is that when I started there as this little lowly security officer right out of the Army, I quickly, as I was promoting up through the ranks, I got to meet all these different people in different departments throughout the studio. And the common denominator was, I would say, and this is not an exaggeration, 80% of them, easily 80% of them, had all been there for 20 years or more. Some of them, 30 years or more. And they had all started at lower positions, and they had promoted their way up, and they became, now they're, some of them were executives at this point. And it was very obvious that if you were loyal to the studio, meaning you showed up every day, you did your job, you didn't do anything to bring bad publicity upon us, you weren't stupid, basically, that you would get promoted. It was guaranteed that you knew that if you did that, that as people retired and so forth, you would keep getting bumped up the ladder because they promoted from within. Okay? That was the way Lou Wasserman ran it. Lou Wasserman knew basically everybody from Scotty, the guard at the gate. When I started there, Scotty had already been there 30 years, security officer. And he knew everybody from Scotty all the way up to all the executives, because they had all been on the studio that long, and they'd all promoted up, and he had probably had something to do with all of them at some point or another. And it was a great working environment. And then, at one point, Lou Wasserman was getting really old. He was getting way up there. And he decided to sell the studio. And he sold it to a company that you, at first glance, you're going to say you never heard of them. Matsushita, Japanese company. But you have heard of them. They're the parent company to Panasonic. Okay? Now you know who they are. And the first thing that Matsushita did when they came in there, they hired all new upper management, of course, and they said, we're going to restructure the studio. And for a lot of people that were already at the retirement time, or they were approaching it really quickly, they saw the handwriting on the wall and they jumped ship. Okay? But for those of us that hadn't been there that long, we're like, what does that mean? Restructuring. Oh, is that good? Is that bad? We don't know. And the old timers would say, no, son, that means that a bunch of people are going to get fired, is what that means. And I'm thinking, well, why? The studio is successful. They make really successful movies, and it runs like a Swiss watch. I mean, the operations of the studio ran like a Swiss watch. Every day, it was clean. It was taken care of. There was nothing malfunctioning. Things were fixed. I mean, it ran well. And I'm like, why the hell would they tinker with that, Because of the corporate America business model. And what that is that you have middle managers and upper managers who get bonuses. And they get bonuses based upon quarterly results. Quarterly results can be affected by any number of things. It can be affected by straight up revenue that comes in from whatever it is that you produce and whatnot. But it can also be affected by cost cutting. Okay? You're starting to put this together, right? So, because of this model of the quarterly bonuses to the middle management and upper management, those people see things through their glasses as, hey, if I hit numbers next quarter, I can buy a pool for my house. I can get those jet skis I've had my eye on. Okay? Starting to put a little bit more of it together, right? So, because the board of directors has to report to the stockholders every quarter, and that's why these managers' their bonuses are based upon results every quarter, and they only give a shit about themselves. They give a shit about the boat, or the jet skis, or the pool they're going to put in, etc. Okay? That business model means that everybody below there gets fucked. That's what that means. On a routine and regular basis. Okay? There is zero loyalty from the top down to these people down here. They don't give a shit. They don't care. Okay? You're a number. You're an employee number. That's it. And you're an entity on a balance sheet. That's it. Now, I then saw Machusta, a couple years later, they sold the studio to Seagram's. Now, I know you know who Seagram's is if you drink, because they make the booze. They're a Canadian company. They make Seagram's 7, and they had, they have all kinds of different brands of booze that they produce, but they also own Tropicana that makes the orange juice. That's also owned by Seagram's. You probably didn't know that, but big conglomerate, of course. Now they bought a studio. Guess what they did? We're restructuring. More people are going to get fucked. That's what that meant. By this time, I'd already been through the first one. I knew what the hell was going to happen. So, my job was obviously on the cutting block. Saw the handwriting on the wall. I had an offer to go back to the contractor that provides the security officers to the studio as a management position, again, as the account manager for the studio that basically managed all of the accounts for the security officer accounts for the studio. So I took it and I went back to that company. American Protective Services is the name of that company. No sooner was I there, maybe 6 months, we get bought out by Pinkerton. Pinkerton Security, at the time, largest security company in the United States. Well known. The Pinkertons from the Wild West days. Those guys. Guess what they did? We're restructuring. They had it about a year. Securitas, the Swedish company, the largest security company in the entire world, Securitas bought out Pinkerton. You see where I'm going? They were restructuring. More people get screwed and everything. I became an area manager for Securitas. After all these changes and everything, I'm now an area manager. I had all of the large studios as my clients. I had Universal Studios. I had NBC, ABC, CBS, Disney, DreamWorks Animation, which was fairly new, 20th Century Fox, and there was a bunch of smaller companies and so forth. But I had all the biggies. We're providing security officers to all of them. I had the worldwide account for the Disney stores, the retail stores. Whenever they needed security at a retail store, they called my office, they got my scheduler, and we scheduled it out from there. I was responsible for all that. But I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't take the corporate world anymore. I couldn't take never knowing when the next buyout was coming. When's the next merger coming? When's the next restructuring coming? And how many people that work for me that are loyal to me are going to get fucked? And I'm going to have to be the one that gives them the news. I couldn't take it anymore. I left the security industry. I went to Texas and I did something else. I call that the Texas experiment. That's a story for another time. But it drove me damn near insane. The corporate fucking mentality drove me insane. We're seeing that now in the video game industry. We're seeing it with these big conglomerate companies. When EA swallows up all these small companies, these game developers that were making great games, but they buy them out, and then they drive the IPs into the fucking ground, or they just shut them down. Sometimes they just shut the studios down. We're seeing it. Activision buys out Blizzard. Now what's happened with Blizzard? They're not producing anything worth a shit. They were one of the greatest video game companies there were. You know, some of the greatest IPs that people have these great memories of and so forth. And what do we see today? We see that they get these great numbers, but they decide they're going to restructure, and they fire 800 people. But you never see the CEOs and the CFOs and all those, they're still getting their big bonuses. And as long as we have this quarterly reporting corporate business model, if we have that model, we're going to keep seeing this shit. Now, there are some companies, big companies out there, that don't prescribe to the same thing. If you look at Starbucks, now you may like Starbucks, you may hate Starbucks, you may like their coffee, you may hate their coffee, whatever. You may hate the guy that ran it, Howard Schultz. You may like the guy. But here's some facts. Starbucks, that guy, he started giving all of his employees health benefits. Part-timers also, not even required to do it, did it because it was the right thing to do. My niece worked for Starbucks. I know this from personal experience. She told me the stories. They pay well. They take care of their employees. They're a good company to work for. So when they got bad news, they didn't necessarily go out and lay off a bunch of people. Okay? They saw that if they took care of their employees would come to work and treat their customers nicely, and their customers would want to keep coming back. Because regardless of what they're charging for a cup of coffee, that human interaction and that daily routine, some people really find that comforting. And they go to the same place and they see Julie that is their barista and serves them their coffee with a smile every day. And that's part of their routine. They love it. And Howard Schultz and Starbucks, they get that. Okay? And in the video game world, we have that too. We have the community managers on the forums and the developers that do Q&As and do and post updates to forums and things that we get to know and get to realize that, yeah, they really do have a passion for the game. They love the game, and they're trying to make us a good game and everything. And when these big conglomerates just see them as numbers, as employee numbers, and say, well, fuck it, they're expendable. They're a cost. They're not generating any revenue, which is wrong. Because if they keep us happy, we keep paying you for the game or the live service or the microtransactions or whatever it is. But they don't see it, okay? Costco is another company that there's a waiting list to go to work for Costco because they pay so well and their benefits are so good and nobody ever leaves. When they work there till they retire. That's it. You know, I mean, there's a few other companies that are very employee oriented, and they invest in their employees. And when I go to Costco, the people are always nice. They're always professional. They get me through the line quickly. They're efficient, and they're the same ones every time I go in there. I don't see a bunch of turnover. I don't see new faces and people that don't know how to work the register because they just started. No, I see the same damn people that have been there for years, and they get me through the line quick, and I appreciate that. You know, video game companies they're just another corporate entity that doesn't get it. Okay, and I don't know if any of this was comforting for you guys, alarming for you guys. I don't know. Obviously it's a bit cathartic for me because I lived through it. Okay, lots of casualties. People that worked with me, worked for me, that had to get laid off, fired, whatever you want to call it, restructuring. It's an ugly scene, and Blizzard and Activision are going through it. Activision Blizzard is going through it right now, and it sucks. And it sucks for us as the customers. But those CEOs, they're going to get their $15 million bonuses. How many people could you retain for $15 million? You know? I don't know. Anyway, guys, if you hung with me for 20 minutes for this, I applaud you. Maybe we'll do another story time later. We'll get into the Texas experiment, as I called it. I'll tell you that story. But anyway, if you found this helpful at all, informative, if it just pissed you off, whatever, leave me a comment, please. Hit the like button. Hit the bell if you want notifications when I upload. All that good stuff. And until next time, guys, we'll catch you on the flip side.